do you prep for war? That's a serious question. How do you prep for war?
We take a folder that has a paper on it, and we go to these stations, and some nice lady signs her name, and then we get on a bus and we go to war.
Yeah.
Or you have a training schedule that you follow all the time.
You
and
have
every
one of
damn
those.
day you do something that the commander told you had to do, right?
Yeah. And I think nowadays, and we had this discussion before where everybody wants to know stuff. So as part of preparedness is transparency in future events.
Yeah.
Because I think, and Robert, maybe you can speak on this, not just because you came in before all of us, but
Because I'm old.
yeah, I mean, that's a whole different subject. How much were you given as far as information goes for training events and future activities and stuff like that in your unit?
Oh, I mean, we had a weekly training schedule that laid out every day of every hour of every day.
Yeah.
And
Signed by the brigade commander.
that's right.
And nobody could mess with
Yeah,
it because it was
it's a
signed
It
by
went
the
from the
brigade
company commander to the S3,
Yep.
put it together, and the S3 evaluated it to see if you were doing really good training and proper training. Then it got signed by the battalion commander. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it was a quarterly training calendar that got updated.
So we're as a young private, how often did you look at the training schedule?
I looked at it quite often, only because it was displayed in a place in which we had to see it all
Okay.
the time. Yeah.
So much like the recruiting conversation we had, as times change and we progress and
That
we get
TTP went
computers
away.
and we go away from dot matrix printers
Yeah.
and now the standard of creating that training schedule is still there and the wet signature is still prevalent, right? Nobody looked at that thing.
Mm-mm.
The only
Does
two
anybody
people that looked
follow
at it. Bravo Troop 31 Cav.
You fought for it. You fought for your
fought for
sergeant's time. You fought for your sergeant's time. You fought for your range time.
I can tell you sitting in training meetings. So I don't know how the training meetings went in the Air Force.
In the Air Force, you do the same job whether you're deployed or you're garrison.
Okay.
Like,
Did you have
it's-
training schedules? Do you even know what that is?
There was no prep. Like what I did at home, I did when I was deployed.
It was like a daily agenda.
I had to
Yeah.
go. I had to qualify for my M16 again, and that's it.
Those
No,
cricket
this is one of those things. It'd be like 6 o'clock PT, 8 o'clock.
It's a
8
daily
o'clock.
schedule.
It's a
from
team.
8
It's
to-
a team's calendar.
Yeah, 8 to 10 is team leaders time, and then it have in parentheses maybe the topic that we're gonna be talking
Land nav.
about.
When you're maintenance in the Air Force, you don't have time for that. Like you have other things to do.
Well, I don't know that we had time for it either, but we were told where to be and what we're gonna do.
You know what killed that? I think digital quarterly
I
training.
was just about to get there. Yeah, it's like you would figure out what the end state would be at a high level, right? So, hey, what are we going to do as a reconnaissance squadron? What are we trying to, what's the end state? Well, we're trying to get the NTC and become certified to go deploy. I'm just putting that in layman's terms. So you backwards plan from that. You go, this big muscle movement, logistical movement to NTC. You
guess
bring
we
it
do have
all
that.
the way back down to the individual. So you do individual training. And you figure out what those individual tasks need to be in order to do, the consolidated training at whatever level you're doing at.
So
it builds.
the Air Force has what we call red flag, green flag.
Uh-huh.
And so what the idea is it's statistical that the first 10 sorties, a pilot is more likely to be shot down than after those first 10 sorties. So they simulate that at red flag, green flag, depending like whether it's in Alaska or Vegas. And then you have basically dogfights, and then you practice loading. But it all just
That's the culminating event.
Yeah,
right?
so like that
You
is
prep to
NTC
that.
for
Yeah.
the Air Force.
So I would venture to say, whether you knew it or not, people at echelons above us that are making a larger paycheck were creating events.
But in the Air Force, one of the best things I was told to me when I first got to my first squadron is that like a fighter jet is like a racehorse, so it needs to be going all the time.
Yeah.
So we're going that pace year round all the time, whether there is a war or not.
Yeah. So, and ours was more cyclical.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a red, amber, green cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the red, amber, green cycle is, but to her point, she was saying that, the jets had to be ready to go at a moment's notice all the time.
Like, I think that people don't understand, like, if you work on the fighter side of the jets and the Air Force, like, how hard you're working at all times. Like, to where a deployment doesn't actually feel any different than when I'm home.
Yeah. Okay. You've just changed the geographical
Yeah,
location.
I'm just in a new location.
So
Doing
for
a different
us,
thing.
we would backwards plan from this culminating event, which would be an NTC, JRTC. And then during wartime, the actual culminating event was war. So
Yeah.
we're trying to go get certified, have faith in the command in order to deploy us and go serve. And that's all based off the patch chart. And so that's how our schedules were laid out. But it would dwindle all the way down, and it would drill all the way down to the individual. And so a year out, now we're doing individual training. That's the M16, and all your small weapons qualifications, and shoot, move, communicate, medicate. Those are all the things that we're trying to do.
And then NTC was the culmination of that, kind of the end before you went to war, that basically demonstrates that you're certified, kind of thing.
Well, certifying capabilities echelons above the individual. So the brigade commander's getting certified.
I actually have like a kind of funny story that got brought up randomly in a friend that I was talking to the other day that kind of shows like the Air Force is really, really good operationally with making sure they get their mission done, but how almost like disconnected they are from that location of like, where am I going and why I'm doing it and what's the danger there?
Yeah.
So when in my first year in the Air Force, I deployed to Bagram. So I did all these things that you guys are talking about, but it was more or less like, I will just be in a new location. And we didn't really even talk about what life would be like when we got there. And so I had never actually heard the verbiage attack before, as in the base is being attacked. Yeah. So we get there, we have to do like a combat landing into Bagram. My like stomach is in my throat still. We're running around. I don't know why. And then finally, I keep hearing people around the base talk about attack, like when we're attacked. And I didn't know what they were talking about. Like I didn't understand what a attack was. And everybody can laugh at me for this. But so finally I asked a roommate, because I was like in this little place living, a bee hut basically, with 4 other people I never met before. And then there was a staff sergeant there that had been to Bagram like a couple of months prior to that. And I was like, everyone keeps talking about an attack. Like, what is an attack? And I will ask the question. I'll ask the dumb question because I need to know the answer. Yeah. And she looked at me. She's like, why the fuck are you here and still don't know what an attack is? And I was like, I don't know, but can you tell me? Because like nobody will tell me. And she was like, it means like the enemy's attacking the base. And I was like, okay, so like, what do I do? And then she's like, usually you don't even know. Like, usually it's like, could be like somebody throwing a rock at the fence or whatever. So I was like, oh, okay. She's like, you'll sleep through it. Like, you'll keep working. It's fine. And then if you're on the flight line, you'll just scramble. Like, that's what you've been practicing. And I was like, it's all coming together. This is great. And so then I go to bed thinking like, okay, this is great. And then I wake up and I hear shells on my roof. And I hear an Apache above me. And so we're being attacked. And so she's waking me up because I'm a deep sleeper. And she's like, wake up, we're being attacked. And I was like, okay. And I just go back to bed because she told me to go back to bed if we're being attacked.
Expectation management.
Yeah. And she's not from my base. I don't work with her. She's a stranger. And so she's like, you need to get your fucking ass up. You're about to die. And I was like, you said attacks aren't big deals. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, can't compute, and I haven't slept for like 3 days at this point. Yeah. And so so I like jump out of the bunk, and then I'm so Air Force at this point that I was like, what do I need?
A weapon?
Yeah. And then I was like, and then she's like looking at me like I'm stupid because she's freaked out. And so I was like, do I need my CAC card?
That's a legitimate question.
They're going to swipe you into the bunker.
Because in the Air Force, you can't do anything with your CAC card. Yeah.
If you need to go to the sandwich bar, you got to have a CAC card.
Yeah. And she was like, get your fucking weapon, like put something on your body, and we need to leave. Because we're also on the it's obvious to her, like this is really, really bad. And I'm not computing it. And so she was like, just follow me. So we like run out to this bunker, and then I see 2 Apaches that are basically aiming towards the attack. Yeah. So later to find out it was the largest attack on an Air Force installation since Vietnam. And I was just like underneath it on my third day.
You were ready to sleep right through it.
What year was that?
Huh?
What year was that?
2010.
Oh, that was when it got overran.
Yeah.
That was that was right before the dust won and the Navy dudes got lost.
Yeah,
so
and I was just there.
We have a live account.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
what month was it? It was
It had to be May.
It was right before I went on R&R.
Yeah. What was funny too is like, so then I was confused too because there was all these tactical things that I had never even thought about. Like it was never part of my training at this point. And so I'm in the bunker and then I'm hearing like gravel move and footsteps. And I was like, well, how are we supposed to know what are good footsteps and bad footsteps? And like, what am I still supposed to do here? And I don't know any of these people. I've never even seen any of these people in my life. And so then I'm like, I think I'm just kind of like on my own at this point. And so I remember I like snuck my head like outside of the bunker and I see like obviously people being very tactical. I don't even know what the formations were. And I was like, oh my God, it looks like Call of Duty. Like I was so freaked out. Like nobody prepared me for any of this.
Yeah.
And then.
Wait, you didn't do any of this, Caitlin, like basic training or anything?
No.
Really?
No small unit tactics at all.
Well, for what?
Basic
what you're going through right now.
Basic life-saving measures.
The largest attack on an Air Force base.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, how do we know when it's over? And then they gave us like something that I had, I think, attached to my cat car. And I finally look at it and it's like codes, like, and I was like, I guess I just wait for this one alarm. And I still don't know what to do. And I'm still very, very afraid of my command at this point. So I was like, am I going to get in trouble if I don't do something right? And so I finally get told that I can go back. And then I don't know where to go after that. Cause like, am I in the attack area still? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I end up falling asleep because I haven't slept in 3 days. And I'm like, my adrenaline finally like dropped and I just passed out. And then somebody from my shop like is randomly at my bed shaking me again, like, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, I literally don't know. Like I'm just trying to survive. But come to find out what the attack is there was several suicide bombers. So one suicide bomber would go penetrate one fence and he would create a hole and then another one would come. So I guess those two Apaches were just getting them one by one. Yeah. So they never penetrated, I guess, the last fence or the barrier, but there were several points. It was kind of crazy.
Some of them walked in ACUs too.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the training that we're talking about.
I know that I needed.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, they actually reinforce that training because each installation has it. There's nuances to each installation. It's based on size, location, proximity to enemy. So, we were at Dalkey, and it was the bottom west side of the old Fob Shank, and it's like the last frontier out there. So you're getting rocket attacks. We know that the warn system's going to go off. We know that the C-Ram's going to fire all those bullets up in the air and knock the rockets out of the sky, right? So we're prepared for that. So it just blows my mind. But Bagram's so big. We were there. We had a couple of rocket attacks, but we're briefed. Hey, we're at Bagram. It's a little bit different. When you're here, if you're in close proximity to the bunker, get there. If you're on the bottom floor of something, just stay where you're at, find a whatever hideout. But then after that, it's immediate accountability of your individuals. That way everybody knows, because we have to send that
immediate green 2 after that.
That green 2 report is your accountability report. That's like ingrained.
Now being
what
like
we do.
An older human being, being an NCO after that, I just don't think they should have ever separated me from my unit. And
that's the thing that I was going to ask is where was your direct leader?
They were, so all the males were on the flight line, and so they didn't have any housing for females, so we all had to be over in Camp Cunningham. So I had a 30-minute commute, and I was away from my entire unit.
That's wild.
So you didn't have a touch point back there with
and then what was funny is there was a DSN somewhere I found one. So I called my shop and I was like, hey, I'm just letting you guys know I'm alive. And then they're like, that's cool. Like when I'm telling you they did not give a fuck, they literally did not give a fuck. I have data to show they did not give a fuck if I survived.
That's amazing.
Like they would have complained about cleaning out my shit out of a locker while I was dead.
Solid.
So we were a little different. We gave a fuck.
Yeah.
If you would have been in our unit,
kind of our job to give a fuck. Yeah.
We actually had a TAC P, so with the Air Force, and we gave a fuck about him. And I headed up the Joint Operations Center there on Dalkey, and these are battle drills, and we would do these battle drills and make sure that, because you've got different organizations, you have civilians, you've got We actually had the Navy out there. We had the Seabees, I think. Might be lying. Anyway, but you have different Army organizations that aren't organic to what you're at. And so you have to tie all those people in as well. And then once you get them tied in, they understand that, when everything goes off, go to the bunkers, you're going to get the alarm letting you know that, we're all clear. And then you come in and report your accountability. That to us, that's the basics. Obviously, everybody does it a little bit differently. That goes into the training. And so when he came in, the training schedule was paramount because it allowed people to go up, and they usually hang them in the barracks. So there's a bulletin board by the training room, and you can go in there and you can see the entire week what the expectation is. So that gave a lot of people comfort to know, right? And that actually reduces the amount of questions. As we start to get into this digital age, the requirement to do the training calendars were there, but people weren't looking at them. And you can chalk that up to the culture, and people living in the barracks don't really give a shit about reading stuff on a wall. Even if there is anything on the wall, if you put it by the training room, nobody really looks at it. Instead, people are just going to be like, hey, what are we doing this week? Hey, it's on the training calendar. Well, where's that at? I mean, it was constant. So first sergeant, I knew the training calendar was there. We'd have our training meetings. You would sit down, you would talk to all the platoon sergeants about what their PT plan is for the next week, and they lay it out, and we're doing muscle strength and endurance. That was MSE.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or if you were in wall rod, it was run.
Yeah.
All the time.
Or we do we're not going to do CrossFit, but we're going to do a high intensity
functional training.
Functional training. They're not wall wads. Remember, wall wads.
So all
but
those
it's not
things
CrossFit.
had to be outlined. And at any given time, a senior leader, like a Command Sergeant Major Green, could check the training calendar and then go verify the fidelity of that calendar.
And they usually would.
Yeah. And so that's how they check to make sure that, it's the trust but verify.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew what was going on, but none of the soldiers want to read it. And so now as a leader, you're trying to figure out, do I take the time to, in this digital age, hand the training calendar out to everybody? Because also it's not sensitive information, but it's kind of sensitive. It shows your battle rhythm. It shows the types of things that you're training on. And if the enemy were to get their hands on it, you could definitely glean a lot from a training calendar, right? So where I'm getting at is like visibility. When you were talking about actually having a transparency of what you're doing, it actually calms a lot of people, because a lot of people have stress and anxiety from not knowing. What are we doing? You just talked about it. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
I don't know.
So it's either you go into a deep depression, right? And you just kind of shut down. You're like, I'm overwhelmed, so I'm not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. Or you're running around with your head cut off. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. Either way, it's not a good feeling.
But it's isn't it kind of though a different mission set? I mean, you think about it, like what you were describing is the planes are constantly turning. So they're constantly revolving, and you've got to do your job. You have a shift, you get there, it's the same thing, different pilots, different planes, whatever, same thing. It may not have been your specific job, but that's usually the flight line type of thing. Go to our side of it. We're in garrison. So we got to do PCMS, go pull pull a pack out of a tank and, make sure it's good. And, whatever the case, the track, and tighten it up, do some training, break the track or something, and do some training and physical training, rifle, marksmanship, whatever the case may be. Because we're waiting and training for that moment when we go to a field training exercise. We go to a gunnery. We go to a NTC. We go to combat. We have those periods of like lullness, I guess. So we want to make sure that we're training the basics and keeping people proficient.
Yeah, it's the shoot, move, communicate.
Whereas she's always just doing the same repetitive thing over and over.
Well, we're used to seeing combat logistics. She was in true, not that it wasn't combat logistics, but it's a true logistical job.
Yeah,
it's 24/7.
Yeah,
that's your tactics and TTPs to load that round. Obviously, were paramount to what
reps,
to do.
Reps matter with my job.
Yeah. Reps matter with our job too.
Yeah,
but we don't get the same kind of repetition.
We don't get the same kind of repetition.
Don't have access to it.
No.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is we create training events to where we can replicate.
Yeah.
So that's our access. And as we start to grow, training aids become better, The digital capabilities are better.
Mm-hmm.
We can go into a building and simulate. So we can sit behind at the sim center. We can sit behind a whole bunch of rifles that are pneumatic and they replicate, a range, and we can qualify like that. Bats, you coughed, all the different digital systems that we can go in, big video games for tanks and Bradleys, and we can qualify and shoot the enemy and all that kind of stuff. But none of that really ever touches what war feels like, because what we can't replicate is, somebody always said, you're not going to know your reaction to a firefight until you were actually in one.
Yeah.
So you could laugh, you could cry. And we used to laugh because, you got the macho people that are like, oh, I'm going to close with destroy the enemy, or I'm just, I'm a big badass. And then they show up and they get shot at and they run or they cower, That's their natural body's reaction. They had no idea they were going to do that, fight or flight. So the question being is how do we combat that? How do we combat, the not being prepared? And so for us, it's creating the training event, understanding there's a system of getting to a point, learning how to do all those things and doing it repetitiously. So it becomes muscle memory. We become comfortable within that.
Well, what you're talking about is conditioning, like cognitive conditioning, classical conditioning, which essentially is the format of like basic training. That's why it's over and over and over and over.
Yeah, but it's for the individual, but also for the team, because the team needs reps just as the individual needs reps.
But you're asking more of the question of psychological preparations or neurological.
Yeah, and there's a lot of universities that are doing stuff with the Ranger Regiment. I'll bring it up, but they do a lot of the neuro studies of, like work capacity under stress, neurological stability under stress. Are you thinking cognitively? Can you do things all at once while you're tired?
I think I would tackle it by looking at like the temperaments of the unit and then going through that phase of understanding like how many type of temperaments do I have in this unit. And then knowing that much, then we could focus on this.
Okay, so what's a temperament?
Yeah, I was going to say define temperament. Like
a temperament, like you can just think about it like training a dog. Like what kind of dog you have based on their temperament. Like you can as a species look at a different species and just know like I'm not going to fuck with that one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that has like an angry temperament. You know what I mean?
So you talked about subcultures before, right?
Yeah, that's where.
So from a leadership standpoint, and I'm just speaking from experience now. Those temperaments are vast. Like there's so many different types.
I don't know if there's that many when it comes to temperament, because you're might be confounding it with personality.
That too. So that's why I was trying to get the definition of temperament. So
temperament is like the
offset,
offset,
categories?
like how I present.
Okay.
Yeah, especially under stress.
So more like there's fewer categories in that sense, like 2 or 3. Is it anger all the time? Is it?
That was just something to like in layman's terms. I'm not well versed enough to speak on it, but temperament is just like that. How an affect, like an actual better scientific term for it would be affect. You just don't hear it much. Yeah. It's more or less the layman's term for temperament, or temperament is layman's term for affect. So an affect is just like kind of like overall day-to-day how I present myself to the world, and not just like how I choose to present myself, but day-to-day, like what is my affect?
And so that's awesome, because I didn't even know that, but we do actually train in ways to bring out someone's the affect, right? That not what they present, but who they truly are.
Yeah.
So, you push people to their threshold to figure out, we're not trying to break people. You just want to know who you are for real.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we put.
What are you going to do when you're tired? What are you going to do when you're hungry?
And that's a lot of like the assessment and selections that you see. They bring in a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, and they do the mind studies and try to figure out, hey, what thing can we do to bring that out of somebody to actually see who they are?
Well, affect is inherent, so you can't choose to have a certain affect.
But what we're doing is we're trying to create an event
to see what affect you have.
To see
Right,
what it
Yeah.
is.
Right.
when
So-
put in that stressful
So
environment.
what I would want to do, like if I was like a researcher standpoint that was allowed to come to that unit for that training prep, I would want to see how many archetypes of affect that I see in that unit, and then create a training module based on affects. Because why would I like have anybody do anything if they don't have that affect in the unit?
Yeah.
Wasted time.
That's and that's actually happening. So that's cool. I just, you put it eloquently. We see it, but that's exactly what's happening. We bring outside entities in that can actually see and measure and analyze and say, okay, these are the different things that you need to focus on, because these are the type of, in my mind, it was personalities, but whatever we're putting onto it. I think
Personalities really don't like come into play when in performance as much as people think.
really
Yeah,
how,
it's more affect.
man, I'm going to have to dig into that now. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning
Personality has a lot to do with my interpersonal relationships.
stuff. Yeah.
In the military, it's a different type of interpersonal relationship as far as professional goes. Like when I show up to my corporate job, I'm showing up as a certain thing and I'm performing the way that my company wants me to perform.
Yep.
When I show up in the military, like you can't really run from the military. You live and breathe it 24/7 and you're locked in. So you end up just kind of like shutting down all of these different things and showing up to like whoever you actually are.
Very true. He was a dick.
Yeah. I mean, I've had soldiers tell me you came through the door yelling and you yelled all day, and you're like, I was like, you're damn right I did.
Yeah.
You're
That is your affect.
That was who I
You're
was.
an externalizer is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And then you probably
I have zero poker face. If I'm pissed off about something or if something is bothering me,
Kyle had
Well,
zero
you probably
facade.
also have something to prove.
Kyle, 100%.
Yeah.
Kyle always
But
had. Kyle's the
other
youngest of
people
9.
don't.
He has
Yeah.
everything to prove.
A lot of people
even
don't have
the
something
Yeah,
to prove.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's your motivator. Like if
Mhm.
if you were in my unit and I needed you to do something, I would motivate you by being like, look, like so-and-so said you're a bitch.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, we said that big word.
When I was in high school, the joke was all you had to do is say, "I bet you won't."
Exactly.
Yeah, and
That
that
would
was,
be-
and it was.
it would be
I'm
easy
going to
to
do
motivate.
exactly that what you said I wasn't going to do.
And in high
Yeah.
school, Kyle would say, "Hold my beer."
Yeah, I was like, I bet this Ford Ranger can jump that fence. Let's just try it real quick.
So we talk about the differences. Well, goodness gracious, man, you took that to a whole different level.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but yeah, just it's cool to define it
Yeah.
because I've heard subordinates say it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome to know that there's like a definition out there that it's not just,
Scientifically.
like people are tracking that kind of thing.
There's
Because I think it's a huge part of the military structure or the military as a whole, like identifying that type of person and giving that leader that tool in the toolbox of going, that's a whatever you said, something to prove archetype or whatever that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a tool in the toolbox. If you had 3 soldiers that all 3 were different, you have to lead them differently.
See, the old school method was, everybody gets the same treatment.
Yeah, get in line.
Right.
Everyone's right-handed. Ask the
Like,
Marines.
Everybody's going to run in combat boots. Everybody's going to wear this. Everybody should know this. And then we start to realize that that's changing.
Mm-hmm.
You would see it with the special operations community. They started getting a lot more into the mental aspect of combat and performance. And I don't know if it's a money thing, but it just didn't really get to the conventional army for a while. But then we started like delving into that and started realizing that, I mean, an example would be, kind of an analogy would be running. We would stretch, which we're finding out now that you probably shouldn't stretch. You should do some sort of a dynamic warm up and get the muscles right. And then everybody would just run. And the expectation is that everybody should run well, run fast, and together. Okay. So, but there's so many differences in size and mass and the way that we run, your hips and torso length and all this stuff that we just didn't think about. But as we start to progress, you start thinking about methods of running, like the pose method of running. Like how do we run better? Heel strike, probably not. You're going to stop yourself and you get momentum, and now it's all physics related, right? So we started thinking about ways of making people better athletically, but you'd have to see them as an individual or the type of person that they were, right? What's your body type? The 3 different body types. And then based off of that, you're probably going to run like this. And so this is what we're going to focus on. I think it makes better athletes. It just makes leadership a lot more complicated. It makes preparedness a lot more complicated. So when you were in, and when I say you, and when I came in 96, training and layouts were easy. Our TA50 was like 36 items. You can lay it all out on a poncho and everybody could look the same, and make sure you black out your eyelets. And you fast forward 15 years and I've got 3 shopping carts full of gear, and it may or may not match the stuff that you have because it depends on the location you were at and whatever contractor gave us the gear that we had. Or you might have a different camo style. So that makes everything different. So I think preparing for war, there are so many different variables that Kevin Humphreys did it the best way. Kevin Humphreys was our old commander, and he would bring training down to the bare minimum. And you heard me say it before. It was shoot, move, communicate, and medicate. We have to be able to do those 4 things to be successful as a combat organization.
He came from Ranger Regiment.
Yeah.
That's where he got it from.
Yeah.
That's your blocking and tackling that we talked about in the last
That's
one.
the 4 things they focus on right there.
Shoot, move, communicate, medicate.
Yeah.
Because if you can do those 4 things, we can expound off of that. We can just go in so many different directions, but we always have to be able to bring it back into those 4 fundamentals. And if we can do that, then we're going to be successful and we're going to be prepared. So I've always come back to that. That's why I didn't ever think it was really that complicated of a subject, because within that, I can go off on many different tangents. And then based off of what you were saying, how my soldiers are, who they are, what they give us, I can focus my training around that, but it's going to be based on those 4 fundamentals. I believe that there's a lot of leaders in the military now that try to get too sexy with their training. They just go too far with it. You know, we shoot, move, communicate. If I go to shooting, we got to go down to the basics of shooting. It was as simple as doing prone shooting, right? So you get down on the ground, you pick up your weapon system, and you sight the target, and then you shoot at the target.
You know how to zero your rifle. Let's start there.
Well, no, I'm zeroing, right? Well, okay, let me take it all the way back.
Yeah. We're going to mechanically zero.
You go to mechanically zero, the battle site 0, and then you have to make sure that you group correctly. So a lot of people would shoot just 3 rounds to go check their target. Why not 6? Why are we doing 3? It's supposed to be 6 to figure out if you even know how to group, and then from there we can figure out how to bring your sight picture back down in. Once you figure that out, then we can start getting a little more dynamic in the movement. But going back to Mr. Ranger Regiment, right? Captain Humphreys would get behind the soldier as a captain. He said, "Go ahead and get in their prone position. Let me see this." And they would get down in the prone position, pick up their weapon, and then they would maneuver the weapon system within their body and how the body was comfortable. And he said, no, that's wrong. Well, nobody's ever taught these kids that. He said, get the weapon system pointed in the direction that it needs to go.
And then get behind it.
And then get behind it and get comfortable, but do not touch that weapon. Once you're comfortable behind the weapon, then you can secure the weapon. And now you're in a proper position to sight and shoot. If you're doing it the other way, you've just created too many variables, and you're going to get a different sight picture every time. Wow, we're talking basics, right? But then you'd have other commanders that would like do this Fisher Price, my first qualification, and then jump straight to a shoot house. Yes, sir, we're going to go do battle drill 6. We're going to go enter and clear a room. And you still have people that don't know how to get behind their weapon system.
I think that goes into like bigger things. And even when you get out of the military, like, are you teaching me theory or your principles? Because I need to know the theory before I hear about any of your little nuances.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that they actually taught that theory. I think that is the problem. I think it was based on the instructor and how they were taught and so on and so forth. Whereas I think like, in regiment, a lot of those soft units, they get training that is very consistent and very regimented in terms of what they're and how they're being taught. And you can see that in so many different ways of how well they excel in a lot of things they do, because they do focus so much on the basics. That's what's so important. Yeah. Get the basics. Get really good at the basics.
Well, that's how you tie mental and physical training together. Is you're physically doing it. Obviously, you're getting your reps, but then you're getting that mental training. You're getting the mental reps. You're getting, well, I don't know. It's muscle
creating the
memory,
confidence,
cognitive muscle memory or whatever you want to call it. I don't know the technical term. But like you're getting the reps there where it's going to do nothing but build confidence because you've seen it more times than not. You've thought about it more times than not. You've learned things from each rep that have now come to this end product that is trained. Is somebody that was trained.
And what we try to do is, it's not what we try to do. It's almost mandated that we create standard operating procedures, and each organization creates theirs based off of the type of the organization there are. So from a reconnaissance standpoint, we would have Humvees and we had Bradleys. Each of them had a load plan. Each of the load plans need to look the same. What do we need to take? Where's it going to be? He should be able to get in my truck. I should be able to get into his. And if it's dark and we're in chaos, the muscle memory of knowing where everything's at, that should be it. Was it like that? Probably not. Everybody would get in their gypsy wagon of a Bradley and want to make it theirs. But the true disciplined organization creates that standard operating procedure, and then they utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes their Bible, right? And that's what guides you through all this stuff. So it's not just load plans. It's, the operations orders. It's military decision-making process. It's all the battle drills. And it's from, from combat, stability operations, whatever you want to do, it should be all inclusive and in there. So everybody has the same frame of mind when they go into the battle.
So why SOPs are so crucial cognitively is because there's no such thing as muscle memory. Like my muscle has no memory.
Yeah.
So what it is
I didn't know the technical term.
Yeah. So what it is what is called priming. So every time you want somebody to kind of get the clue where you're trying to get them, you prime them somehow. So when you actually do the whole thing rep-wise, you're priming them. And so then you have it physically done over and over. You're creating neural pathways for that. The more you do something, you get a stronger neural pathway. You're having action potentials moving around through that neural pathway associated with the good thing that is associated with the standardization.
Is that, it's conditioning? Is that like Pavlovian theory?
You're taking a dirt road and making it a 4-lane highway.
Yeah.
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 That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
To me.
And so if everybody is
you're making
primed,
connection easier there.
If you have several people that are primed all the same way because you did the training singularly, and then if you can do it like people who have never met each other, then you work in a collective organization that can be predictable. And humans work so well when they are predictable to one another, and they're more dangerous when they're unpredictable to the other human, which is the enemy.
Well, this goes back to one of the episodes that we did where we were talking about the football analogy. Again, we go back to that, basic thing. It's blocking and tackling. We talk about the basics. You mentioned the 4 basics and stuff that you learned that was taught a lot in Ranger Regiment as well. But when you think about like football and stuff, everybody's got a role that they're supposed to do. And if they do everything right based on the playbook, and we practice in the playbook over and over again, and you just do your job, we're going to function together as a team. Yep. That sounds like what we're hearing here is that it's teaching that same rhythm, that same pattern, regardless of the individual, so you can plug and play, because each individual should have been taught to play those roles at that specific time frame. I guess what gets even harder is when you then start expanding, can you play multiple roles? Can a tight end go out and play slant receiver position or something, or even a wide out and do it quite well where it fools the defense because we got a fast 6'5" dude that they didn't expect. Yeah. They were thinking he was going to be a labor dude that's going to be 3 yards in the clouds of dust type tight end.
But then just from like modeling perspective, then you make yourself more susceptible to errors.
See, this is where I don't know that the military gets this deep.
Yeah.
And if they do, we discussed the telephone game before, right? Mm-hmm. Use modern Army combatives as a great example of what right is supposed to look like. And Matt Larson working with the Ranger Regiment and, creating a martial arts that fits the military need and structure. And then the great idea of teaching modern Army combatives to everybody else. And it goes back to what you want it to look like. And then the further you get away from that center of gravity, it gets different.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, it's bastardized from unit to unit.
correct.
But also, like, priming exists in a psychological way as well as not just a physical way. So even if like you'll never get the exposure to combat, I can still prime you psychologically to feel confident.
Yep.
And so I think half the reason, like, especially like the Army training that you all go through is so paramount, and like it requires so much thought process, is because you're also trying to make people psychologically resilient, and not resilient as an anti-suicide, resilient in that, like, I'm confident that I could be successful.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take that even further, because I think what you're describing, or the better way for that to be successful, is take out the leader, the individual, out of the equation. Again, they should be plug and play. The instructor and how they teach should be plug and play. Everything should be the exact same, which means that from the time, and especially for those in more combat arms is what we're describing here, whether you're in the Marine Corps or you're in the Army or in some other branch that's really going to be seeing combat, where you're training that way, then that means that starts day one. Day one conditioning is to prep you to continuously build upon that. So first you create the pathway. Then the next thing is, that's that dirt road that you created. And then you start paving that bad boy, and then you lay on another layer. And then I think that's what the Army tries to do. The problem is, I come out of basic training and it's like, forget everything you just learned, because you're now here at the 82nd and I'm going to teach you the way you're going to learn it here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you leave the 82nd, you go out to first cav or something like that. And they go, I don't care where you came from, jump boy, that you're not in the airborne anymore. You're here and you're not going to be doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And
A great military way to think about psychological priming is, everybody hates that guy that PCS is in, is like, well, at my last bait, this is how we do it. He psychologically can't get out of it. He was primed. That neural pathway is so strong. Yeah. And it's not like he wants to be that dude.
Back and brag.
Back and brag.
Yeah.
Well, it's because also I think we create these tribe environments.
Yeah.
So we want to create the tribe so that we can actually get individuals to want to work together as a team. But the downside of that is, when we get new blood in, you got to learn your stripes.
Yeah.
And you can't bring those bad habits from that other organization into my tribe.
Yeah.
But when do you determine that it's okay to change? Or is that another rabbit hole?
When do you determine it's okay to change?
Yeah, so
you should always be up for change.
You should be, but how many organizations or units you've been in where, well, that's the way we've always done it?
Well, then that's a killable unit.
It is, but you'd be surprised how many people won't stray from what they consider to be the baseline of status quo, because that's the way they've always done it, and they've seen success in that method. But as we progress as a world, time goes on, things change, right?
Back in the day, we used to talk about it in the way of what you're describing, like a range card. Yeah. I know my left limits and my right limits, and I know, this is where I want to teach you and how I want to train you, and I'm not leaving that space. It's
because you were told to do that.
That's what I was. Right. Yeah. It's that repetition we were just talking about, though. But what you're talking about is the way it could be better is if everybody learned and understood it the same way. Yeah, I guarantee you go to basic training at Fort Benning, and then you go to Fort Leonardwood, totally different. From San Antonio, probably different too. They all have the same supposed to be the same.
No, it's different on even on the same instance. So Sand Hill, right? They've got infantry OSIT. Over on Harmony Church, they've got the 19 series OSIT, right? I ran a hand grenade range. It's a very scary place to live and train, because you've got civilians, soldiers in training, that are learning how to throw an explosive device, and it's kind of scary. We took a lot of pride in how we taught our soldiers in training how to throw hand grenades. You go over to Sand Hill, and it was a completely different animal. The way that they ran it was like old school. I felt like I was watching Stripes. It was just the instructors thought they were drill sergeants, and there was just kind of, I'm not going to say lackadaisical, but there was a lot more yelling, and there was a lot more. And our standpoint, we were trying to use like the ABIC style of, or, teaching, which is using the motivator and using an example of what they're getting ready to tackle, and then, walking. I don't want to induce stress on the first day the cat is trying to learn how to throw a hand grenade.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to learn what we're teaching them. And those are the two different teaching styles that you could see. And that was on the same installation.
Mhm.
Well, just like neurologically, that doesn't make sense to induce stress on a first round try, because if I'm inducing stress, I'm putting in your limbic system, and then you're literally a lizard. Like,
But tell that to a whole group of drill sergeants that probably have no idea that exists.
yeah, but they weren't. A drill sergeant is not a drill sergeant to teach people. They're there to condition people, and that to teach and to condition are two different things. Those are two different objectives.
And they get those. And I'm not disagreeing with you,
Yeah.
and you are much smarter than I am.
Yeah. No.
They're not getting taught that, and they can't delineate between the two.
They think conditioning is teaching.
There's blurred lines there,
Yeah.
right? And so what ends up happening is there used to be instructors, right? And then there would be drill sergeants.
Right.
The drill sergeants would do, the
Standards,
the
order,
standard,
discipline.
tearing people down, conditioning them how to be a certain way.
Well, let's think about it. Like in basic training, what are the actual true objectives? It is to be psychologically conditioned, right? To no longer put yourself above others, to socially just get into the groove of what it's like to be in the military, and to physically be capable to be actually taught.
Yep.
Nothing, you don't learn anything.
Well, in OSIT, it's one station unit training.
So
what
there's
they
a
do
blurred
is they
line.
combine that
Mm-hmm.
with, oh, by the way, you're going to learn how to be a scout. So we were.
Is it a phase?
Yes.
Yes.
It was supposed to be phased.
But if you messed up, you got a red
You go
ribbon
back.
around
So,
your whatever. But it
what
was.
we're doing is that's the way it should be.
Mhm.
And we're letting you know that the way it was. So when I went through one station unit training in Fort Knox, Kentucky, it was 16 weeks. So I had 16 weeks of basic training. 16 weeks, I had the same drill sergeants and the same temperament, if I'm using that word correctly. They were dicks the entire time.
Yeah.
And then
Right. That's such a great way to think about temperament and affect, is like your drill sergeant had to put on an affect every day to do their job.
Yeah.
That's not who they were every day.
Mhm.
Well, we didn't know the difference.
but then eventually,
Yeah.
Like in their real life.
Yeah.
I don't know
There
what
were
they look like in real life. All I know
Yeah.
is when the car door closed
Yeah.
out there in the parking lot, I better get my ass out of the bed.
Yeah.
I will tell you that affect actually turned into the person that
Oh,
he
I'm sure.
became because
Because
they
of a neural
become so
pathway.
conditioned to being that way, right? Yeah. So we were having to learn how to, turn on a radio, load a radio, SOI back in the day, learn how to load, unload, cycle Bradley, blah, blah, blah. All these things we're having to learn
While you're doing marching.
while we're
you're-
marching and getting yelled at and being turned into a soldier.
Right.
So all those things, the Army was like, we'll just do all that stuff at once.
Well, they
Now-
want the stress while you're doing the job because you're a combat arms MOS.
Yeah.
And the drill sergeant is there to provide the conditioning. He's also there to provide the stress.
I'm not saying that that's the right way to do
We're
it.
not saying but it is the way.
Other military occupational specialties, like at Fort Jackson, and you go back to the combat service support, that's exactly what they do. They do basic training first, and then they go off to advanced individual training where it's less stress, more teaching.
Yeah.
It's regimented, right? There's still guardrails there, but they're not supposed to be yelling.
Yeah.
I remember, I had instructors.
Yeah.
And they wore the regular soft cap and everything, patrol crap or whatever. And then the drill sergeants wearing the Smokey the Bear.
Yeah.
So I knew the difference between the two. The problem is that I really didn't in my stage know the difference. I just knew that he kind of transitioned over, this is Sergeant Jarvis, and Sergeant Jarvis is going to teach you right now how to throw a hand grenade. Sergeant Jarvis, but at the same time frame, Smokey Bear hat standing right there. I still feel all the pressure. I'm still trying to be a soldier. I'm standing at parade rest, or I gotta still be in my private basic training mode.
Yeah.
So it never was like chill the hell out.
And that was the
learning
difference
something.
between his and ours. So I was a little of the same way when I ran the hand grenade range, and this was in 2010, 11. They actually disconnected the drill sergeants from the training.
Made him leave.
So
Yeah.
so the drill sergeants
Smart.
wouldn't be there for the training. They would keep one as a point of contact.
Yeah.
But then all the learning All the training came from us so they could learn.
What is it today?
That also creates a great positive connection because you're like a safety because they probably haven't been nice. No one's been nice to them for a while. It's the way
that they felt. Now, I'm going to throw this into the equation. There was a time where the instructors were running low, and so the drill sergeants did have to do the training on top of being a drill sergeant. So my drill sergeants, the only thing they taught me was drill and ceremony. And that goes hand in hand with yelling at me and telling me how to march and doing all that.
My drill sergeants did everything. There were instructors there. There were cav instructors there. Yeah. They were E4, E5. They were corporal sergeants.
We were so low on instructors.
And the drill sergeants taught me basic rifle marksmanship. They taught me machine guns, hand grenade. They ran the hand grenade range. They ran the bayonet range. They did all of that in basic training. And then once we got to OSIT phase, it was like they taught us reconnaissance.
Everything. So it's really weird. And we know the way it's supposed to look. Yeah. But then going back to recruiting and manning and wartime efforts, like if I have an organization that's short on personnel, they're getting ready to deploy, do I want an instructor or do I want somebody that's a dismount or a gunner? I want the gunners. So now we just pull the instructors, and now drill sergeants are teaching classes, right? So maybe that's where we lost some of, maybe there's some of the disconnect in the learning and the quality or the type of people that we got.
I think some of the great things that have been now brought down from I think it was tier 1 that really started honing in on selection, making the right selection of individuals. Then you had like tier 2, tier 3 type units that then started focusing on, hey, if they can do that and they're doing it quite well, why don't we do the same thing? Yeah. The problem is that there was a point at which it stopped. They only wanted to take so much of the good. They didn't want to take it all and understand the importance of it. I think those, a lot of soft units and everything do exactly what you're talking about. From the time you enter selection until the time you leave there, it is very much, I think, what you're describing, but in terms of conventional and stuff, most of those guys, they miss out. They don't get that kind of, they don't get a selection. It's supposed to be basic training, let's say, but yet we're just describing the combat arms part of it. And then there's never a repetition. It goes back to when you change installations, you change companies, you change platoons within, you change squad leader, team leader, you may get a different type of modality and a different effect and such. So I'm curious, I want to get into something we've talked about. And I think we touched on your episode, which is around ACE. So the precondition, how a person already is prior to coming into the military will also determine much about what they're going to learn, but then also the effects they may have even from combat and being put in distressful situations. Yeah.
ACE, adverse childhood experiences, is defined as any kind of childhood experience that you have, 18 or younger, wherein it would be traumatizing to you, whether it's that you saw it, that you experienced about it, or you heard it, whether your caregiver was abused in front of you or neglected, or you heard about it, or you yourself were abused or neglected. And military men are one of the highest populations to have ACE.
I'm sure there's a number of statistic out there that explains why. I mean, we talk about the recruiting, right? If we're just bringing
why military men have ACE. So the research says, and it's speculatory at this point, because also to get men to admit to their ACE is in itself a hardship as a researcher. But the speculation is to say that men who have experienced ACE then therefore seek out the military. It's not that they're sought out. It's the other way around.
What you're talking about is so wild to me that I agree that there's a certain age maybe where you start embracing or realizing that some of the traumatic events of your early childhood are why you are the way you are. But unfortunately, by that time frame, you've already had kids that you've conditioned as well.
Well, I don't even know if you can even make that leap. Like when you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old deciding whether or not you want to enlist, I don't even know if you're admitting to yourself that this thing happened to you and that it's abnormal. Because a lot of abuse is common, and then therefore we think it's normal. But just because something's common does not make it normal. It's still abnormal regardless.
So the traumatic event is that like subjective? Is it like what
Clinically,
defines?
it's completely objective, but in the human experience, especially with how we tell boys like to tough things out,
Yeah.
Suck it up. That's what I heard.
suck it up.
Yeah.
And then also, like, boys are basically, as soon as their voice starts dropping, like, they're expected to man up. So I think also part of that is some cognitive priming to like stop talking about the shit that happened to them and start manning up.
Yeah.
And I think that even like I'm watching it happen now that my son is like a preteen, I'm seeing how it's like happening even younger than I would have thought prior, even doing the studies that I've done.
Huh.
You can just see him kind of, my oldest is kind of getting there where he's not complaining as much. He's kind of
just putting up and shutting up. I'm like, you don't have to. Like,
Yeah.
I'll bear it. I'll hear it. I'll hear whatever you have to say.
Yeah.
And it's like somehow just like ingrained to him that he's not supposed to. And like, I would say because of who I am and how much I love him, I've put his most emotional intelligence into him. But there's something about his social norm gender or just inherently his gender biologically that is making him just put up shut
So
up.
that's what I was just getting ready to ask you. So do you think there's some genetic code or something that is passed on? I mean, we talk about, like if you had even third, fourth grade, fifth grade grandparents or something that was an alcoholic or struggled with alcoholism, there still could be a very good chance that it could be passed on genetically. So
yeah, see, like that is easy to find genetically in your RNA. Our mRNA, an addiction gene, but to talk about emotional well-being, like I don't think the science is there yet, as far as I know.
yeah, makes it kind of interesting though, because I can, we were sitting here in the room, and I think we all three, if we were to talk off mic, would probably say, "Well, I know your story, and I know your story, and I think you guys might know mine. I don't know if Sean does, but I had a pretty tough childhood. So I feel like all of those things probably, most certainly we all ended up into the military. I actually came as a military brat and might have been part of it. Vietnam, Korean vet, Korean War vet and combo. And, there was a lot of probably post-traumatic stress and stuff that was brought to the house and the whole bit. And you're right. At the age of probably 12 years old, I had posters on my walls of, Marine Corps, Army. It was pretty much those two. And it was going to be, my friends were talking about going off to college and stuff like that. And I was deciding, am I going to go off to college or am I going to join which branch?
Yep.
And it was already there. I already knew it was going to happen. It was just, it was also my escape. It was an opportunity for me to get the hell out of Dodge.
And that is something that's unique to the female veteran population is the military usually is an escape from something else. It's a social escape. And dually, they report feeling like they'll finally belong to something. So a lot of times they feel like they're loners or not well understood. And that's kind of their gust too, that are like, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to prove myself. Like if I can make it with boys, then I can prove myself.
That was one thing for me was getting back to join a team because I was in sports my entire life and I spent, played a little baseball in college and then, 3 years without being on a team, 4 years without being on a team and being part of something bigger than myself. And oh, by the way, it was a safety net for me being a fuck up too. But and it's just, there's certain things that you miss about who you were whenever you thought you were doing the best. And that was just something that I saw myself latching on to.
Aren't we tribal by nature?
What I thought was interesting, like when I was absorbing all this information as a veteran, and what I thought was interesting about all of this, and maybe it was just those researchers or civilians asking these questions, nothing about those individuals that reported these things had anything to do with like, I'm ready to kill.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was all about my self-gratification of being put up to a test.
Yeah, and being better than I was.
And so when we circle back to the conversation about deployment readiness, like how ready are people psychologically ready to be part of mass murder, whether that means or physically pulling the trigger or just the moral injury of being a part of this organization that does this?
There's a lot of conversation about how people compartmentalize when they get over there, or I hear a lot. I mean, even some of the most seasoned combat veterans will talk about how it feels like a video game, and that's how you mentally and psychologically deal with taking a human life or seeing blood or seeing some stuff on fire. The stuff that you can't prepare for are like smells, right? You can replicate a smell, maybe that'll help out. Mass reaction. So if you put me in a situation, I know I can react to it a certain way, but a lot of people vibe off of other people's reactions. So to get an entire group, a whole platoon, and some, traumatic war type thing happens, how does that entire group function? How do they react? Because you've got leaders, you've got followers. We have a rank structure. So if I see somebody that's super confident in what they do and they can lead well, and I see their reaction is, the fight, right? We're going to go towards the gunfire. That gives me the confidence to go do the same thing. And they see the masses doing the same thing. They see all their buddies, a platoon.
But isn't that too late to build confidence to go towards gunfire?
No, I'm saying is that's built in the training that we do. So, I would hope that he would be confident enough to follow me into battle based off the way that I led the troop.
Yeah.
We established that back in garrison, right? So once we establish that rapport and the trust and the confidence in my ability to lead, then that gives him a better feeling of following me in. Now we get into that situation. I've already proven myself in that arena. If I come out here and he sees that I'm cool, calm, and collect, whether it be a facade or not, in this traumatic situation, that gives him the confidence to replicate that same thing, hoping. So those are some things.
It gives me the confidence to want to be like that, but how do I end up like that? Because I don't know you're compartmentalizing, but that's how I'm doing it. I'm compartmentalizing. I'm taking this bad thing, and it's going to go. Yeah. There's got 4 walls and some bolts, but those things get leaky.
Like my confidence came up a lot. If we get shot at and I see the reaction of everybody around me, I mean, I'm not physically going, oh, how are you doing? Okay, well, let me see. What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, all right. Well, we're all doing well. Let's just go do this. It was more of you can see it out of your peripheral, right? Your periphery. I'm looking and I can see everybody doing this battle drill or whatever.
Their job.
Oh, this is gonna fucking work. And that builds a lot of confidence. And if you see that repetitively, here we are. And I think that's how you kind of prepare. I mean, the question is, how do you prepare for war? I mean, we do things over and over and over and over and over again, understanding that whatever situation we're in is going to be different every time, right? They say a plan goes to shit at first contact. It does, but that's why we have alternate plans and contingencies and emergency plans. But if we have that SOP, we build it, and we can execute it, you can lift those 4 fundamentals up and put them anywhere, and you're going to find some measure of success. I think the ones that are hard to train is, like I said, like smells and like the visual effect
the somatic.
Yeah. So in my mind, those are the things that stick out to me the most is like visually I can get simulated whether I'm here or overseas or whatever, right? But the smells and the sound were the two that really were different from a garrison training environment and then, a combat environment. So I don't know a lot, but I think if you could replicate those two things, and I'll give you an example. We did ROTC. We went out and we did this consolidated training event, and we put the cadets through lanes. And this is the cadet summer training at Fort Knox. So they had this patrol lane, and you have to do key leader engagement, and then you're going to get some sort of, you're going to get into some sort of asymmetric warfare where somebody gets injured and you have to call in. Well, we had the great idea of replicating helicopter sounds, and then we brought in smoke grenades, and we had this thing out on a loudspeaker, and so people are trying to maneuver and do all this thing with limited visibility with these really loud helicopter sounds going on. And in the after action review, everybody was talking about how they felt like they were immersed in this super realistic training. And most of the people are going to shit all over ROTC training. But I can tell you from somebody that's done, at that point I'm a master sergeant, I'd seen a bunch of training. That was really awesome. And it was really awesome because the cadets took the training seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another aspect of how do you prepare for war is you take the training that you're doing prior to seriously. If you're going to replicate the environment, then you should replicate the actions in that environment. So you take the seasoned veterans or the people that know what they're talking about, civilian professionals, you bring them in and you say, this is what the expectation is. Take it seriously. We're trying to give you all these training events, these training aids, make it realistic.
Does that help you prepare emotionally, though? That helps you mentally and physically, but does that help? Is there any preparation, emotional preparation for war? Other than maybe like a tie back to religion?
Well, what do you define as emotion? Because I think a lot of people don't define emotion equally. Like, can you name some?
I don't think we're ever, I mean, this is wartime. This is here.
Yeah.
No matter how many times it happens, we're never prepared for the death of somebody that's close to us.
Well, yeah, you can take it all the way there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's an extreme, grief is an extreme emotion.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's what
but there's also like a change in life that no one really talks about. There's a like a change in self that you kind of lose a little bit of yourself. You were one person, then this thing happened, and then you're another person.
Yeah.
Well, you're the same person, but
what is that emotion? Like you sound emotional, but what are the emotions?
I guess it would be grief. I don't know, like loss.
I think that's how you prepare emotionally. Is you start identifying.
You start
okay.
Emotions. Yeah, you can name it. So
name
if you,
the emotion that
but
you
it's
feel.
a bit of that.
So maybe that's why it's hard for the older combat arms units to do because they were mostly all male.
Well, then, yeah, there's no training.
Yeah. We're not training emotions.
You've never been primed. Nobody's asked you what I just asked you. I can tell.
No.
Yeah.
But there's two things though that's going on here. One, it's the emotional aspect of the trauma and the event of losing somebody that you're close to, that had your back or was your buddy and beside you at that moment. And then at the same token, there's I just had a brain fart.
There's a guilt.
There's a survivor's remorse aspect of this that comes out of it, that the survivor's or the survivor guilt or whatever that comes out, then it makes it worse, right? Because one, you're trying to close it in the back of your head, but at the same token, you're like, why do I deserve to be here every day? And you relive that part of it and beat yourself up for that part, but while you're trying to close off the other piece.
So what you just did was you talked about the cognitions that you feel, and you skipped over the feeling that you feel. So like that is emotional training. So like when you're talking about your survival's guilt, you went why? Those are cognitions. If you're asking a question and you're making a statement, those are cognitions. That's a thought, and it's unique to you. Some may share it, some may not. But I bet everybody that lost that person all felt grief. Yeah. And that's one statement. So a feeling is usually a word.
Which, from a male standpoint, you've got me thinking about the words I'm using now. I don't know if we're conditioned to express the feelings, or at least even
we haven't been primed
to a point where we're trying to identify the feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's not there. I can tell you though. I mean,
how many women have honestly asked you how you felt?
Allison Sedka, when Donnie killed himself. So we had an amazing. She was.
That's not a clinician.
It's what?
Not a clinician.
Like a woman.
How do you feel?
Oh well, I mean that's not fair.
Yeah,
I mean it is fair.
I mean it's.
I'm going someplace with this. Okay. So Allison Sedka came in outside of her normal realm of counseling, which was the alcohol counseling that she did, but she's also a specialist in grief management. And so she came in, my driver committed suicide. We found him in the barracks, and that caused a bunch. We were a yard sale of emotion, right? So we bring in Miss Allison Sedka, and she gave us a really, really good presentation, but allowed for us to show our feelings and talk about the feelings. And what you were alluding to is the same things that she was talking about, because we would skip past the feelings and go straight to
Why?
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, you need to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but she went through all that stuff. And I think that helped with the resiliency a lot.
Yeah.
And that may be the key to the answer.
Being able to name it.
Yeah.
It happened again a year later. We had another soldier whose wife passed away, and she was pregnant. The baby was born and then almost immediately passed away. And we were all very close to him as well. And so we brought her back in for that.
Yeah.
But we were prepared for that one.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not going to say we ever healed from that, but it definitely wasn't as traumatic because I think we knew what to expect.
You were primed.
Yeah.
Which is what you were describing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's training. Like to
Yeah.
answer the question,
yeah,
you can
you're-
emotionally train yourself.
We're answering the question by using examples that we didn't know that we had.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of people seek medicine of some type, whether it's plant-based, whatever, to try to build those neural pathways to be able to get in touch with those, to get it out, maybe deal with it, and then they can go forward.
So what I think people like, and I struggle with this myself, I am a perfectionist, and even I know so much about this, and I'm never going to be a master of my emotions. And once you accept that I'm never going to master it, I'm never going to be able to just like know all my emotions all the time. I'm not going to be like, I can't even do this exercise for my own self all the time. But knowing that I need to is really identifying the problem. If the problem is how do I emotionally prepare? It's, well, can I do it day to day? Can I do it at home when I stub my toe? You know, like little things, like you build up the fundamentals so that when you have the big event, the big thing, you can look at the horizon and say, that was crazy. I feel this. I'm pressing.
Also understanding that it's not like a zero tolerance thing, right? We're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be able to identify your feelings all the time.
Yeah.
You can't, it's like the fat loss specialist that gets fat. They know exactly what they got to do. They know what they got to do. They just don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, maybe the answer is that you teach people.
But you can do that as a leader every day as an NCO. Like you can say to your troop, like they just failed something, right? And you're like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
You're like, what are you thinking about? And you don't have to use like, tell me what your feelings. Like you can say some other word that's a lot more acceptable.
Yeah.
And then you could even say like, I hear you saying that you feel sad. Do you feel sad? And they'll be like, you can just tell it like, yeah, I fucking feel sad. And then that's that. And like, that's all it usually takes.
Do you leave it at that or do you expound on that?
You can usually tell by people's affect and body language, like if they want to talk more,
Yeah.
if they want space. Like it's pretty like body language when we talk about emotions, that's when everything kind of expounds. Like you can tell, am I open? Am I closed? Do I want to talk to somebody else? Like it's pretty easy to tell.
I'm plagiarizing. I copied this from one of our instructors at the Sergeant's Major Academy, but he said feedback is a gift, right? Whether it's verbal, nonverbal, right? Body language, attention, inattention. But you receive so much information just by looking and observing and feeling and talking to somebody that you should be able to negotiate that and make decisions from that. And that's why it's such a gift, because you receive the feedback and you can do with it what you want. Now, some people make the wrong decision, but the point is that you got to be able to look at that. And that's what makes good leaders is they have the ability to use that feedback and make decisions based off of what they see.
Well, some leaders, any emotion other than anger to failure is wrong. Like being sad because you failed, you can't be sad because you failed. You need to be mad because you failed. Like sometimes there's like...
Are you saying that's the standard, or are you saying that's what's happening? You're saying that's a general...
That's a general, like, that is...
Wait, that was what motivated you.
No, that's what motivated them, and fear motivated him.
Right. Well, but it was something that me challenging or putting you in a position which made you angry and made you come out of your shell to go and then I felt like what we're talking about here though is more of like there is to prepare for war. It's more than just the muscle memory or the learning pathways or whatever we're
Your
describing.
muscles don't have
No,
that
what do we call it now? We call it
Idiot.
priming.
Priming.
And priming goes all the way from the mental aspect is what we're learning that can even help us in a combat situation. So it goes more than just learning how to zero your weapon and make sure you're doing that and following training schedules and doing all the basics of the 4 things that you described earlier. It then goes into the prime of the mental aspects of are you talking to your people in a way in which you're preparing them for when that moment does happen, of all of those experiences, including the sounds, the smell, the potential trauma of losing a buddy through the conversations that you're having and building those pathways. You're going to have a stronger unit, a stronger cohesive unit.
Well, it creates understanding, a lot more transparency. I think that actually vulnerability has a tendency to create confidence. If I see vulnerability in somebody and they can admit to it, but they can negotiate it and they're not trying to show that they're strong all the time, in my mind, that's somebody that's real. I have confidence in them because they have the ability to show the feeling, a state that's not always this chest out and carrying invisible luggage, right?
I would venture to say somebody that you prime emotionally is probably going to be better in combat. And I have like really no reason to say that like professionally it's just my personal opinion. But like if I know how you are like mentally and emotionally, then I could probably predict how you're going to be when you're stressed out.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they tell us all the time as leaders is, know your soldiers. And I think a lot of leaders just take it at face value. Like we're not just talking about boot size and
Address.
address.
Yeah.
And, go do
Their dog's name.
go do a sensitive site exploitation of their home. What's this bill? No, it's know your soldiers, know their threshold, know personality, know affect, know all these little things because everybody's different.